Forgiving doesn't mean you just forget what the other one did or you take away the consequences for what somebody has done. What it means is that you make a conscious decision to let go of the hate for them in your heart. And you don't hold on to what they did to you and let it kind of brew as bitterness or malice. What I'm referring to is Charlie Kirk's wife choosing to forgive the person who killed her husband in cold blood. This is something that in our country we deeply need to understand, because it's a core issue of what's wrong with our society right now. Is there is no forgiveness. The hype is all about heightening the response, good versus evil. The problem is you have to use wisdom and what you've learned through life to determine what is good and what is evil. There is an actual good and an actual evil. The problem is as humans, we all fall short of the glory of God. We do not have the understanding or the means to identify good and evil on our own, solely on what we see. We must use wisdom, and what God intended was actually to follow His instruction to determine what is good and what is evil. And you can see that in the book of Genesis. The fall of man was actually all about man deciding that he wanted to decide for himself what was good and what was evil, and that's why they chose to eat the fruit. And we were never designed to do that, therefore we're not good at it. So this is one of my opinions, and take it just as that, nothing else. My opinion is one thing that's going on in our particular country, in America, and I believe probably in a lot of places in the first world countries around the world, is there's a lack of understanding of consequences for your actions. Now, I'm speaking directly to things like the Charlie Kirk incident, where somebody would be willing to go shoot somebody and in cold blood because they believe that they're evil, and for some reason it's up to them to enforce good, what somebody else has defined as good to them. And in that, there's no real understanding that there's consequences that are going to happen to you because of those actions. We have forgotten how to train our children. It's all about discipline or not discipline, instead of how do you train your children in the way that they should go, like the Bible says. Consequences there's always consequences for your actions. If you sleep around, you have consequences, meaning you're losing part of yourself to that person all the time, the other person that you're participating with all the time. But there's also a risk of even bigger consequences. And I think the abortion issue is one of those where people want to use that to negate some of the consequences of what they're doing. They don't want to actually take responsibility for what they're doing or have any self-control whatsoever, which is actual strength. They want to just they want to live in weakness, which is following your emotions, and then not have to deal with the consequences. How this relates to parenthood is, as parents, it's our responsibility to teach our children. So a couple things that I did with my kids is I understand that there's certain consequences like death that come from running out in front of a car, let's say, or doing something with fire, or maybe even firearms. You have to teach those consequences before the actual consequence, the really big consequence, comes into play. That is best taught by putting something in your child's way that they have to choose one way or the other. Now, that doesn't mean you don't tell them what the right way is. You tell them, this is the way that doesn't have a consequence right here. There might be a consequence to both, like the consequence is you have to deny yourself something. A little child, if two things are in front of him and one of them is dangerous and one of them isn't, must be able to make the decision, because you can't be there every second of their life to determine what is good, what is harmful, and what is not to them. They have to be able to reason that themselves. So if you're, one of the things we did when they were really tiny is teach them to come to you. When you say, come here, that means come here. And people thought I was mean by that. And I don't beat my kids, but I'm talking about discipline, something taken away, a slap on the hand, something like that. The reason I did that was because in public, if they're headed towards, let's say, a moving vehicle, and you say, come here right now, and they keep running, that's a life or death situation. Now, you may laugh at this, but that is reality. So it's my job as a parent to help the child understand. First of all, let's think about safety. So how do I enable this child to understand that that is important, that they come to me? As they get older, though, the choices become different. It's like when you're offered drugs, when somebody is trying to, getting in a relationship as a teenager, that might cause you to end up with an STD, sleeping with people, that kind of thing, or keeping yourself from marriage, which is laughed at in our society, keeping yourself from marriage. So, or let's say alcohol and drugs. So what I did is anytime, number one, we told our children, this is what happens when you take drugs. If you start taking drugs or start drinking alcohol, it can lead down this road. There's always somebody in your circle, somebody in your family or just outside your family or in their school or whatever, that you can show them. We just don't normally take time to do that. We can say, now look at so-and-so. They started smoking way back years ago, and now they're trying to quit. And it is so hard for them to do and it's starting to have health consequences, this health consequence, that health consequence. The easiest way to quit that is to never start in the first place. These are conversations I had when they were 10. So when you show them that, anything happens at your school, somebody gets caught, somebody has a bad thing happen to them because of drugs, or you see somebody sleeping around and somebody gets pregnant, things like that, point it out to your child and say, that's the decision you have to make. You make this decision, right? It's harder short term because you have to deny yourself something. It's easier long term. If you drink and drive, when you get to that age, you drink and drive, show them somebody who's in prison for life because they drank one time, drove, killed somebody, and now they're living with that consequence forever. It's not hard to find consequences in the world. And then when they, you enable them to make those choices, but then you also give them the tools to actually do it. And it depends on the child, because some children are strong enough, like my oldest, he just didn't really worry too much about what other people thought. That's a lot easier to deal with than a child who wants to fit in so bad they're willing to do whatever it takes. Those children you may have to corral even more. You want them to make the right decision, but you don't put them in a situation all the time where they have to make that decision in front of their friends or whatever. So what I mean by that is if they're at a friend's house and this comes up where there's alcohol there or drugs there or something else there, that they have to make a decision. If they make the wrong decision, then there should be consequences for that. That teaches them, I'm not just saying, here, do this because I say so, because I think that is one of the worst things you can do to your kids, because it doesn't allow them to make the decision on their own and understand consequences. So if you get grounded, let's say, because of that, then you understand you did not make the right decision. And if you're not able to make the right decision, then I'm going to limit your contact with the things that could lead you astray. I think that's wise parenting, not bad parenting. It's a lot of times I'm sure kids at school are like, oh, your parents are so strict. Yeah, we're strict because we want them to make a decision, but never get into 9 different ways where you have to make that decision between right or wrong. Whatever consequence it is, it better be something you can carry out and you're willing to carry out. Because if you don't carry it out, what that teaches them is somebody will tell you there's consequences in life, but they don't really apply. So don't say, I'm going to rip your ears off, or what. You're not going to rip the kid's ears off, okay? You're going to, say, I'm going to take away your phone privileges for a week. And then do it. Do that. That shows them there's real consequences and that they're true. You have to be a person of integrity, a parent of integrity, to actually carry those out. Because I can tell you what, I don't want to carry those out. It's a lot of work to parent and take that responsibility on yourself. I believe teaching those little consequences as they grow up make the larger consequences and the larger decisions of life much easier for a young adult to deal with. If they're allowed to make the decision and they have a consequence when they make the bad decision. If you never allow them to make any decisions, the other way to do it is just, corral them and not let them have any interaction with life, right? You homeschool them, they never get out there, they never interact with other people. That is not teaching them consequences. That's not allowing them to ever make a decision for themselves. And they won't have any training in that. Therefore, when they hit this is my opinion again, when they hit the real world, work, whatever they do, as soon as they leave the home, you see those kids a lot of times just go way out on deep end because they have no idea how to say no. They don't even understand what they're saying no to. They've never had to deal with a situation where they said no. Yeah, this does, that does look cool, even though they've never seen what happens on the other side of cool in many situations, thinking of drugs and alcohol and sex and all that. So this is something that has to be trained into your children, and it will apply to their adulthood. You can't control your adult's life. So as they go out into the world, they're going to make mistakes. And some kids are going to make way more mistakes than others. So you can't take full responsibility for that. But as kids, it's our job as parents to teach what happens when you make the wrong decisions. It's also our job as parents to clarify what is good and what is evil, and help them to understand it outside of us. So give them resources they can look at, proofs that they can see. This is why I teach you that. I don't teach you that because I think so. I teach you that because there's principles, there's science, there's history, as to say socialism. You can teach a lot of history. You just don't rely on the school to do it because they're not teaching anything, and I'll get to that in a minute, that a lot of things that I don't agree with. So it's your responsibility as a parent to back up what you're telling them from outside sources so they can grow a belief in themselves before they go out in the world and hit college and get all these professors that are teaching them all this incredibly weird stuff and then think that they're going to be able to stand up under that pressure. No way. The argument of I do what I do or do what I say, not what I do, or just do what I say because I told you so when you give them a reason, that only stands up long enough to where they hit the first person who says, your parent doesn't know what they're talking about. And if their entire decision of what they do is based on what you said as a parent and nothing substantiating it, the Bible, science, history, anything else, then what happens is it's very easy for, yeah, my parent is an idiot. Yeah, that's right. All you said then just goes out the window. They have to have a belief in themselves of what is right and what is wrong before they go out there, or somebody else is going to convince them of what is right and what's wrong. And that leads me to the second part of this, which is why is this happening to kids when they leave their parents? Well, number one, we have lost the school systems in our country. Not only high schools and grade schools and public school systems, but also college age. We have completely turned that over to secular liberalism in most cases. There's so many professors who have never actually lived what they're teaching in the real world. And I'm judging this from my time in college, online college, and then my kids' time in college. They are teaching you stuff that's irrelevant to life because I'm not sure. Sometimes I think it's intentional because of their inner beliefs, but other times I think it's because they don't understand what they're actually doing. They're teaching from a point of view that they were taught, so they're just regurgitating what they were taught in school. Their beliefs are all based on what they were taught because they've never actually been out there in the real world to experience it. So let's relate this to the Bible. One group of people Jesus handled way different than others. And you might say, well, Trinity, the Bible says turn the other cheek, and all that. If you actually study the turn the other cheek situation in the Bible, where Jesus is not saying give up and give in. Actually, in their culture, turn the other cheek would be an actual sign of defiance. So we're called to be strong. We're called to be defiant, but not violent. That doesn't mean you don't protect yourself, by the way. You can protect yourself, absolutely. And we can stand up for this great country. But most of that is not violent, as you saw with the following days after the Charlie Kirk murder. You saw thousands and millions of people around the world stand up and show peacefully, we are defiant against what you are doing to our nations and our kids and our freedoms. But it wasn't a violent demonstration. It's a strength of standing up against that. So in the Bible, when Jesus was teaching people throughout the New Testament, what you see is one group of people that he didn't deal with the same. Any sinner that he came upon, any sinner that the culture identified as a sinner, that somebody that you wouldn't talk to, like the Samaritan woman, or the woman who was an adulteress, or even a leper, somebody that was culturally outcast by the culture. He only dealt with them in love. He made sure that he touched them when they were sick and people wouldn't touch them. You know, if they were a cultural outcast, he would make sure he called them daughter. He brought them close to him. But with the Pharisees, he acted completely different. And the Pharisees, half of the Sermon on the Mount is actually, woe to you Pharisees, because you put burdens on the people by giving them standards they cannot uphold and then punishing them for not upholding those standards. And he did that over and over again, to the point that one time when he was invited to a Pharisee's house for supper, he intentionally did not wash his hands so that when he sat at the table, they would call that out. And then he said to them, to the people he was invited to sit down with, you think washing your hands is so important, but it's on the inside that you guys are filthy. And he said this right at the table where he was invited to eat. You see him act this way towards this one group of people. That group of people was the teachers of that day. The teachers of that day who were teaching the law, but in a way that made them look good. They were always better than everybody else. And you do this, I do it, so you do it. What they did often to uphold the law was actually stand out in public and make sure everybody saw them doing something good, which actually in the Bible says that negates what they did. They've received their entire reward if you do it in public. So for the purpose of everybody seeing what you did, then you've received your reward. That is the reward for that. So we see this in our culture right now as we've allowed the teachers of our society to teach our children, to raise our children. It's a dangerous precedent. We've taken God completely out of our schools, out of our school systems and our colleges. Now, I will say there are many good teachers. There's fantastic teachers. In our school right here, one of the reasons we decided to put our kids in public school was because of a lot of the teachers that we know in the school. And so that's not to say that all teachers are bad. In fact, teachers have an extremely high calling. That's why they're held to a higher standard. If you take it on yourself to teach other people, then you're going to be held to a higher standard. You can't hold them to a higher standard or discriminate against them because of one little thing that they've done and then not have that apply to you. So it's one thing that we must do, I believe, in our country is change the school system, because we pay taxes to the schools that then pay these teachers to teach in schools that it's against the law to teach certain parts of anything that has to do with God. And what I mean by that is there's a law passed in the 1980s that makes it impossible to teach science without teaching evolution. You wonder why, we only teach, a lot of people think that we actually teach evolution in schools because it's the proven method for everything, but that's not true. We only teach evolution in schools because it's against the law to teach any scientific method that includes a deity that's not natural, doesn't come out of natural processes. So if you word it like that, that makes any religion or any scientific method that would have anything to do with God or anything else illegal to teach in schools. So that is, that type of thing. We're losing our kids because we're not teaching them the consequences, and then when they go to school, they're being taught in an environment that cannot teach God by law. That is a very, very sad way that things are happening. And now a lot of times society will end up attacking the child, the person who actually did the crime in this case, instead of looking at who is influencing them. How are kids today becoming these messed up people that don't understand what a man and woman is, who don't understand right and wrong, who don't understand there's consequences to your actions in the world? Well, I just named two major reasons why this is happening. You may or may not agree with me on this, but this is life. So when you don't agree with somebody, that doesn't mean you throw away their opinion. That means you look to yourself and you soul search. And if you can't understand and identify your beliefs, and you can't back them up with somebody other than, oh, the news media said this. If you can't find specific reasons why you believe something, then you better question it. So right now in this world, right now in this country, we need to forgive. We need to stand up with strength. We need to stand up and give the other cheek from a position of strength and resistance against what is happening in our country to take our kids away from us and to push them over the edge, to have a completely distorted concept of how the world functions just because of a few laws and how we teach them. I want to hear your opinions on this, so make sure you go down below and write your comment for me. I would appreciate it. Until next time, I'm Trinity Vandenaker. God bless.